The obsidian walls of the Grand Synod of Krell seemed to drink the light, absorbing the bioluminescent glow of the council members, until only their faces hung in the darkness like masks of judgment. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and the pheromones of high-stress biological processes, a chemical cocktail of fear and arrogance that had defined the Krell Empire for 10,000 cycles. At the center of the chamber, suspended within a gravity-dampened field, hung the holographic representation of the sector of cinders, a region of space so hostile, so broken by ancient celestial cataclysms, that it was marked on every star chart in the galaxy as a graveyard. It was a death trap, a swirling vortex of gravimetric shears, pockets of antimatter radiation, and rogue planetoids that collided with the violence of gods at war. And sailing directly into the heart of it, silent and seemingly oblivious, was a single vessel. It was not the jagged, predator-aesthetic design of the Krell, nor the fluid, organic curves of the aquatic races of the Rim. It was a blocky, utilitarian monolith of gray metal, scarred by micrometeoroids, unpainted, unadorned, and terrifyingly massive. It was human. High Exarch Vralik drummed his clawed fingers against the armrest of his command throne, the sound echoing sharply in the cavernous silence of the war room. He was old, his carapace faded to the dull gray of weathered slate, but his eyes burned with the fanatical light of a leader who believed he had finally cornered a monster. Beside him stood tactician Lyra, her younger, more flexible form trembling slightly, not from fear of the enemy, but from the sheer audacity of the plan. They were not facing a fleet. They were not facing an armada. They were facing one ship. But in the last standard rotation of the Galactic arm, the rumors regarding humanity had grown from whispers in the trade lanes to shouting matches in the halls of power. They were called the Unbroken. They were called the Walkers in Fire. It was said they hailed from a world with gravity that crushed the bones of lesser species, a world where the atmosphere itself was an oxidizing poison to half the galaxy. And now, the Krell had maneuvered this lone representative of that impossible species into the cinders. "Report." Vralik's voice was a grinding of tectonic plates, deep and resonant. He did not look away from the hologram, watching the small blue dot of the human vessel inch closer to the red swirl of the accretion disk that marked the point of no return. The trap was perfect. It was not a trap of weapons, for weapons could be countered by shields or armor. It was a trap of nature, a weaponized environment that stripped the electrons from atoms and crushed hulls like dried leaves. "The target has crossed the event horizon of the outer nebula," Lyra replied, her voice steady but laced with the undertone of disbelief. She tapped the datapad integrated into her forearm, projecting a stream of telemetry into the air. "Propulsion is steady, no fluctuations. They are not decelerating. Exarch, they are maintaining a cruising velocity that suggests they are unaware of the gravimetric shear ahead. If they continue on this vector for another fraction of a cycle, the tidal forces will tear their hull apart. It will be instant. They will not even have time to scream." Vralik allowed a hiss of satisfaction to escape his mandibles. "They are arrogant. That is their weakness. We studied their transmissions, Lyra. They speak of exploration and peace, but they build ships with hulls thick enough to ram through moons. They expand like a virus. They ignored our warnings to bypass the Krell territories. They claimed they were merely passing through on a scientific survey, a survey in Krell space." He gestured violently at the hologram. "Now they survey the void. The cinders will scrub them from existence, and we will salvage what remains of their technology to see what makes these apes think they are gods." But Lyra was watching the energy readings, and something in the data made her mandibles twitch in unease. The numbers did not make sense. The background radiation of the cinders was enough to boil the coolant in a standard Krell dreadnought within minutes, yet the human ship's thermal emissions were negligible. It was as if the ship wasn't fighting the environment but ignoring it. "Exarch," she ventured, stepping closer to the dais. "The shear." They just passed the first wave front. The sensors registered a gravimetric impact of magnitude that should have buckled their structural integrity fields. And Vralik leaned forward, expecting the gratifying blossom of an explosion on the display. "And nothing," Lyra whispered, the fear finally creeping into her voice. "No debris, no venting atmosphere. Their trajectory has not deviated by a single degree. In fact, look at the energy output." She expanded the view, highlighting the rear section of the human vest. Their engines flared, not to escape. They flared to compensate. They adjusted for the shear with a micro-thrust maneuver so precise it borders on precognition. They didn't just survive the impact, they rode it. The silence that followed was suffocating. The other council members, generals, and admirals of the highest order shifted uneasily in their seats. The Krell were masters of war. They understood ballistics, shielding, energy output. They understood the brutal calculus of conflict. But they did not understand this. To treat a gravimetric shear capable of crushing a moon as a mere navigational hazard was insanity. Or it was a demonstration of power so profound that it rendered the concept of a trap laughable. Vralik felt a cold knot form in his primary stomach. He had orchestrated this entrapment for months, leaking false navigational data to the humans, guiding them through a corridor of hyperspace that dumped them right at the maw of the cinders. It was supposed to be a masterstroke of bloodless elimination. "They are merely delaying the inevitable," Vralik insisted, though his voice lacked its earlier iron. "The radiation belt is next. The ion storm of the second moon. It strips shielding. It ionizes circuitry. If they survive the gravity, they will float dead in the dark, their crew cooked inside their own metal skin. We wait. We watch." The hours stretched into an agonizing vigil. The Grand Synod became a theater of tension, the air growing stale as the gathered elite of the Krell Empire watched the small blue dot traverse the red hell of the cinders. It was a slow, deliberate movement. The human ship did not speed up to escape the danger. It moved with a languid, almost insulting patience. It was the pace of a predator stalking through tall grass, or perhaps the pace of a creature so heavily armored it did not need to run. As the ship entered the ion storm, the sensor feed from the long-range probes began to degrade, static washing over the image. The radiation there was intense enough to scramble the quantum-entangled communicators the Krell used. "Signal degrading," the comms officer announced from the pit below the dais. "We are losing telemetry. The storm is at peak intensity. Nothing survives that level of ionization. The magnetic fields alone would induce currents strong enough to melt a reactor core." "Good," Vralik grunted, settling back. "Let the universe do our work. We will send a salvage team when the storm passes in a few cycles." "Wait," Lyra interrupted, her eyes glued to the spectral analysis. "Look at the storm." Vralik looked. At first, he saw only the chaotic swirling of purple and gold nebula gases, the violent discharge of lightning that spanned lighter seconds. But then he saw it, a dark spot, a circle of calm that was moving through the storm. The lightning wasn't striking the human ship. It was arcing around it, or more impossibly, being drawn into it. The violet clouds were thinning in the ship's wake, leaving a trail of clear, stable vacuum. "They are absorbing it?" Lyra asked, the concept alien to her tactical training. Krell ships deflected energy. They blocked it. They did not eat it. "Exarch, the spectral reading shows a massive intake of charged particles. They aren't shielding against the storm. They are using it as a fuel source. The energy density of the storm is dropping. They are drinking the lightning." A murmur of genuine fear rippled through the council. To survive a trap was one thing. To turn the mechanism of the trap into sustenance was another. It implied a level of technological adaptability that the Krell could not match. Vralik stood up, his height imposing, but his posture rigid with suppressed panic. "Open a channel," he barked. "If they are not dead, they are listening. If they are listening, they can be intimidated. Perhaps they are damaged, limping, merely trying to keep their systems online." "The interference," the comms officer began. "Use the high-gain directional array," Vralik roared. "Blast through the static. I want to hear them beg for assistance. I want to hear the fear in their voices. No species enters the cinders and remains calm." The technicians scrambled, aligning the massive dishes on the hull of the station far above the planet, focusing a beam of pure subspace transmission energy directly at the anomaly. The static on the main screen hissed and popped, a visual representation of the chaotic energies separating the two civilizations. Then, slowly, the audio cleared. The Krell waited for the sound of alarms, the screaming of dying crew, the frantic orders of a captain trying to hold a breaking ship together. Instead, they heard music. It was a slow, melancholic sound, a series of complex harmonic vibrations produced by stringed instruments, overlaid with a rhythmic, low-frequency thrumming. It was calm. It was beautiful. It was utterly terrifying in this context. The music continued for a long minute, holding the N. Tyre Krell High Command in a paralyzed trance before it faded, replaced by a voice. The voice was male, deep, and possessed a texture like gravel rolling over velvet. It spoke in the trade tongue, but the accent was thick, heavy with the weight of a gravity well far stronger than Krell Prime. "Unidentified station," the voice said. There was no panic, no urgency. It sounded like a man reading a weather report. "This is the United Sol vessel Prometheus. We are picking up a high-intensity transmission directed at our location. We apologize for the interference we might be causing on your local bands. We are currently conducting emergency environmental stabilization in this sector. Please be advised, we are venting processed ion streams. Keep clear of our wake." Vralik stared at the speaker grid as if it had grown fangs. "Emergency, stabilization," he whispered to Lyra. "They think they are the ones posing a danger to us." He slammed his claw onto the transmission key. "Human vessel Prometheus, this is High Exarch Vralik of the Krell Dominion. You are trespassing in a restricted exclusion zone. You are caught in a Class 5 death trap. Surrender your vessel and power down your engines, or we will. We will leave you to the mercy of the void." It was a weak threat, and he knew it the moment it left his mandibles. There was a pause on the other end, a long, thoughtful silence. Then the human captain spoke again, his tone slightly confused, as if he were talking to a child who had misunderstood a basic concept of physics. "A death trap, Exarch? Is that what you call this?" The human chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "We noticed the local space-time geometry was a bit knotted. We assumed it was a navigational hazard caused by industrial negligence. We didn't realize it was intentional. That's remarkably inefficient of you. Do you have any idea how much potential energy is being wasted in this storm? It's a mess. We're tidying it up while we recharge our capacitor banks." "Don't worry, we won't charge you for the service." "Insolence," Vralik roared, his pride stung more deeply than any weapon could penetrate. "You are dying. The radiation alone should have liquefied your crew. The gravity shears will tear you apart." "We are shielded by a singularity core envelope," the human replied, his voice dropping an octave, losing the casual edge and becoming hard like iron cooling. "And as for the gravity, we come from a world where the crushing depth of our oceans prepares us for pressure, Exarch, where the tectonic plates grind beneath our feet. We do not fear the crush. We are the crush. Now, if you will excuse us, we have detected an anomaly at the center of this debris field, a resonance. We are going to investigate. Prometheus out." The link cut. The screen returned to the tactical map. The blue dot was moving again, accelerating now, pushing deeper into the cinders, toward the region known as the Maw, a cluster of colliding asteroids and unstable black microholes that no ship, Krell or otherwise, had ever entered. "They are going to the Maw," Lyra said, her voice trembling. "Nothing survives the Maw. The tidal forces there are infinite at the singular points." "Let them go." Vralik sank into his throne, defeat warring with denial in his mind. "Let them find their end. They are bluffing. They must be." But as the hours turned into days, the impossible happened. The human ship did not die. It worked. The sensors showed the Prometheus deploying swarms of drones, tiny silver specks against the backdrop of the fiery nebula. The Krell expected mines. They expected weapon platforms. Instead, the drones formed a lattice, a geometric web that spanned thousands of kilometers. They began to pulse. "What are they doing?" The question came from the admiral of the fleet, a scarred veteran who had conquered a dozen systems. He looked small now. "They are harmonics," Lyra whispered, her eyes widening as she analyzed the data. "Exarch, look at the gravitational waves. They are canceling them out. The drones are creating an inverse frequency to the gravimetric shear. They are smoothing space-time." It was an act of engineering so colossal, so godlike, that the Krell minds struggled to comprehend it. The humans were not just surviving the trap, they were dismantling it. They were paving the road as they walked it. The violent red swirling of the cinders began to slow. The radiation storms, deprived of the chaotic magnetic fields that sustained them, began to dissipate. The death trap, which had stood for 10,000 years as a monument to the dangerous beauty of the universe, was being domesticated. It was being turned into a garden. Vralik watched the main screen, where the nebula was changing color. The angry reds and purples were fading, replaced by the calm, deep blue of stable space. The hazardous asteroids were being caught in tractor beams, gently nudged into stable orbits, forming a ring system of exquisite precision. And it was no longer a chaotic mess. It was becoming a masterpiece of orbital mechanics. "Why?" Vralik asked the empty air. "Why do this? Why not just fire weapons? Why not attack us? We trapped them, we tried to kill them, and they fixed the scenery." "Because they can," Lyra said, and in her voice was the dawn of a terrifying realization. "Because to them, Exarch, we are not the threat. The environment is the puzzle. We are just noise in the background. They do not fight us because they do not consider us dangerous enough to fight." The realization hit the council like a physical blow. The Krell Empire was built on fear. They ruled because others feared them, but you could not intimidate a storm and you could not frighten a mountain. The humans were acting like forces of nature. They were indifferent to the political posturing of the Krell. They were builders in a galaxy of destroyers. As the Prometheus reached the center of what was once the maw, the ship came to a halt. The stabilization of the sector was complete. The cinders were gone, replaced by the calm of atrophy, a region now safe for travel, rich in minerals and stable. The human ship turned slowly, its bow facing the distant station of the Krell High Command. The communications channel lit up again. This time the image came through clearly. The face of the human captain appeared on the holographic dais, towering over the council. He was an older male, with skin the color of burnished bronze and eyes that held the cold, hard light of a distant star. He wore a uniform that was practical, devoid of the medals and sashes the Krell adored. He looked tired but satisfied. "Exarch Vralik," the captain said, nodding respectfully. "We have finished our survey and we found something we think you lost." Vralik stood, trembling. What could you find in that hell?" "It wasn't a hell," the captain corrected gently. "It was a lock, a very violent, very complex lock. The radiation, the gravity shears, they were a security system. Nature doesn't usually make storms that sustainable, Exarch. Someone built the cinders to hide something. We just picked the lock." The screen split, showing a live feed from the Prometheus's forward cameras. There, floating in the center of the newly calmed space, was a structure. It was ancient, composed of a crystalline material that shimmered with an inner light. It was vast, easily the size of a moon, a geometric perfection of spires and arches. "The tomb of the first ones?" Lyra gasped, falling to her knees. It was a myth, a legend of the Krell religion. The resting place of the progenitors who had seeded the sector millions of years ago, lost to time and chaos. "We detected a faint distress beacon," the human captain continued. "It was buried under the noise of the radiation. Someone has been in stasis inside that structure for a very long time, waiting for the storm to stop, waiting for someone strong enough to walk through the fire and turn it off." The human leaned closer to the camera. "We didn't fire a shot, Exarch, because there was no enemy here, just a broken system and a lost legacy. We've woke them up. They seem eager to meet their descendants." Vralik looked at the structure, then at the human. He realized then the true magnitude of the defeat. The humans had not only survived the trap, they had revealed that the Krell were squatters in their own history, ignorant of the treasures hidden in their own backyard because they were too afraid to brave the storm. The humans had walked in, tidied up the mess, and handed the Krell their own heritage back to them, wrapped in a lesson of humility. "Who are you?" Vralik whispered, his voice cracking. "What are you?" The captain smiled, a small, sad expression. "We are Terrans, Exarch. We come from a world that tries to kill us every day. We learned a long time ago that you don't fight the storm. You build a shelter, you plant a tree, you endure, and when the storm breaks, you see what's left standing." The captain looked down at his console. "We are departing now. The first ones wish to speak with you. I suggest you approach with respect. They seem to value competence." The transmission ended. The Prometheus engines flared, a brilliant blue-white light against the darkness. The massive ship turned and began to accelerate, not away from danger, but toward the next unknown, the next dark patch on the map. Silence returned to the obsidian spire, but it was not the silence of tension. It was the silence of awe. The Krell High Command looked out at the tranquil, beautiful starscape that had once been the cinders. They saw the ancient city floating there, waiting for them. "They won," Lyra said softly, standing up and brushing the dust from her ceremonial robes. "They walked into the fire, put it out, and gave us the ashes as a gift. They won without lifting a weapon." Vralik sat back in his throne, feeling the weight of his age, the weight of his obsolete philosophy. "Yes," he murmured. "They did not defeat our fleet. They defeated our world view. Prepare the shuttle, Lyra. We have ancestors to meet. And send a message to the Terran diplomatic corps." "What shall I say, Exarch?" Vralik looked at the retreating engine flare of the human ship, a new star in the firmament. Tell them the Krell Dominion wishes to learn gardening." The transition from the immediate crisis to the aftermath was not sudden. It was a slow unraveling of the tightly wound coil of Krell society. The weeks following the incident of the cinders were marked not by parades or executions, but by a quiet, pervasive transformation. The story of the Prometheus did not stay contained within the High Command. It leaked, as truth always does, filtering down through the ranks of the military, through the merchant guilds, and into the hives of the common citizenry. The video of the human ship surfing the gravitational tides, The audio of the calm captain, the revelation of the first ones. It spread like a benevolent virus. The Krell had always defined themselves by their strength. Strength was the ability to crush, to conquer, to withstand pain. But the humans had shown a different kind of strength, the strength to heal. It was a paradigm shift that shook the foundations of the Dominion more than any bombardment could have. Deep within the archives of the diplomatic spire, Ambassador Zarth sat before a terminal, reviewing the logs of the initial contact for the 1000th time. He was a xenophobe by nature and trade, a creature bred to find the weakness in other species and exploit it. He had spent his career drafting declarations of war and ultimatums. Now he was tasked with drafting a treaty of friendship. It felt absurd. It felt necessary. "Ambassador," a subordinate chattered, entering the room with a stack of data crystals. "The detailed scans of the Prometheus have been analyzed by the engineering cast. They are confusing." Zarth turned one eye stalk toward the young aide. "Confusing how? Is it advanced weaponry, stealth tech?" "No, sir. It is the redundancy. Every system on that ship has 3 backups. Their hull is not just armor. It is a self-repairing lattice of memory metal. Their life support systems are over-engineered by a factor of 4. The engineers say. They say the ship was built by a species that expects everything to go wrong all the time." Zarth hummed, a low vibration in his throat. "Paranoia." "Preparation," the aide corrected. "They call it resilience. They built that ship not to win a fight, but to survive a catastrophe. It is a lifeboat, Ambassador. A lifeboat with engines capable of moving stars." Zarth looked back at the screen at the image of the human captain. "A species that treats the universe as a series of inevitable disasters," he mused. "And yet they explore. They do not hide in bunkers. They build their bunkers and fly them into the unknown." "There is more," the aide hesitated. "The first ones, the awakened. They have refused to speak to High Exarch Vralik until a human representative is present." Zarth stiffened. The first ones were the gods of Krell myth. To be denied audience was a humiliation. "Why?" "They say," the aide checked the crystal, "they say that the Krell have forgotten the great duty. They say we became jailers when we were meant to be custodians. They view the humans as the only adults in the room." The humiliation was complete, but with it came a strange clarity. Zarth realized that the Krell had been children playing with swords, while the humans were the ones fixing the house. The diplomatic summit was arranged on the neutral ground of the newly stabilized cinders, now renamed the Garden of Atrophy. The humans sent a delegation, not of soldiers, but of scientists, engineers, and philosophers. They arrived on a shuttle that looked as blocky and unrefined as their mothership, but it moved with a grace that belied its bulk. Vralik, Lyra, and Zarth stood on the landing platform of the ancient First One structure. The air was breathable now, thanks to the atmospheric processors the humans had left behind as a housewarming gift. The sky above was a tapestry of calm stars, the violent storms of memory recorded only in the data banks. When the human delegation disembarked, Vralik was struck by their physical vulnerability. Without their powered armor, they looked soft. No carapace, no claws, just soft skin and hair. They shivered slightly in the cool air of the platform. "High Exarch," the lead human said. She was a woman of middle years, her hair graying, her eyes possessing that same terrifying calm as the captain. "I am Ambassador Solara. We are pleased you accepted our invitation." "It is your invitation," Vralik asked, his voice rasping. "This is our territory, this is our ancestral home." "Is it?" Solara smiled, not unkindly. "You left it in the dark for 10,000 years, we too. Arned on the lights, but we are not here to claim it. We are here to ensure you know how to maintain the improvements we made." The meeting that followed was unlike any in Krell history. There were no threats. The humans laid out technical schematics, ecological impact studies, and cultural exchange protocols. They spoke of the cinders not as a trap they had escaped, but as a project they had completed. They offered the technology to stabilize other volatile regions of Krell space. "What is the price?" Vralik asked finally after hours of discussion. He was a realist. There was always a price. "Do you want mineral rights, subjugation of our border worlds, tribute?" Solara looked at him, and for a moment her calm facade cracked, revealing a deep, ancient exhaustion. "Price? Exarch, look at the stars. There are infinite resources. We don't need your minerals. We have matter fabricators. We don't need your worlds. We have terraforming engines." "Then what?" Vralik slammed his fist on the table. Why help us? Why not destroy us when we tried to kill you? Why save the first ones? Altruism is a lie told by the weak. The room went silent. Solara leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table. You call your space the Dominion. You call your neighbors threats. You call the unknown death. We don't see it that way. We look at the dark and we see loneliness. She gestured to the window, to the vastness of the galaxy. We are a species that evolved on a world that tried to freeze us, burn us, drown us, and starve us. We survived by huddling together around a fire. When we got to the stars, we found they were cold too. So we decided to bring the fire with us. We don't help you because we want your gratitude, Exarch. We help you because the universe is too big, too cold, and too empty to let potential friends die in the dark. Even friends who start out shooting at us. She paused, her eyes locking with Vrolic's faceted gaze. We trapped the dangerous ship Exarch. That's what you said in your logs, but you didn't trap us. We are the trap. We trap you with kindness. We trap you with logic. We trap you with the undeniable fact that life is better when you aren't trying to kill everything you don't understand. And now, you're caught. Vrolic stared at her. He felt the anger draining away, replaced by a profound sense of vertigo. She was right. He couldn't fight this. How do you fight an enemy who refuses to be an enemy? How do you war against a people who fix your roads and wake your gods and ask for nothing but conversation? We accept your terms, Vrolic said, the words tasting strange on his tongue. The Krell Dominion will cooperate. Excellent, Solara stood up, smoothing her uniform. Now the first ones are waiting. They have a lot of questions about why you let their garden go to weeds. I suggest you take notes. They can be quite pedantic. As the humans left the chamber to prepare the audience with the first ones, Lyra leaned close to Vrolic. Exarch, she whispered, I have reviewed the historical database the humans shared with us, their history. And they have a concept called domestication. They took wolves, apex predators, and turned them into loyal companions by feeding them and sheltering them. They took wild grains and turned them into crops. They take the dangerous and wild things of their world and they love them until they are useful. Vrolic looked at the door where the humans had exited. He thought of the cinders, now a garden. He thought of the Krell, now allies. We are the wolves, Vrolic realized, a shudder passing through his carapace. They did not defeat us, they domesticated us. Is that bad? Lyra asked, looking out at the calm stars. Vrolic followed her gaze. The universe looked less frightening than it had yesterday. The dark was not so deep. I do not know, the High Exarch said, but I suspect we are about to be very well fed. The integration of the Human-Krell alliance was not seamless, but it was inevitable. The humans brought with them a chaotic energy, a drive to fix, to build, to change. They looked at the rigid caste systems of the Krell and asked, why? Until the questions eroded the foundations of the old ways. They looked at the stagnant technology of the Dominion and introduced the concept of good enough is not enough. But the true turning point came a year later. The twist of the cinders, the awakening of the first ones, had been the catalyst, but the first ones had a secret of their own. The first ones were not gods, they were refugees. In the great hall of the reclaimed spire, the first one representative, a shimmering entity of light and silica named Ethelgard, floated before the joint council of humans and Krell. We did not build the cinders to keep you out, Ethelgard spoke, their voice resonating directly in the minds of the listeners. We built the cinders to keep it in. Vrolic felt a chill that had nothing to do with Temperat. You're it, what is it? The entropy swarm, Ethelgard projected an image. It looked like a cloud of ink, a void within the void, consuming stars, erasing matter. It is a machine intelligence from the intergalactic void. It seeks to maximize entropy. It eats order. We fought it for 1,000 years. We lost. Our last act was to seal the breach in reality it was using to enter this galaxy. The gravity shears of the cinders were the seal. The radiation was the lock. A silence deeper than the grave fell over the room. And we, Captain Thorne of the Prometheus, now an admiral, stepped forward. His face was pale. We unlocked it. You stabilized it, Ethelgard corrected. You stopped the chaotic fluctuations, but in doing so you removed the turbulence that confused the swarm's sensors. The door is not open, but the camouflage is gone. They know we are here. Then we have doomed the galaxy, Vrolic said, his voice heavy with the despair of the old warrior. We are not strong enough, even with the humans, we are not strong enough. That is why we hid, Ethelgard said. We calculated that the probability of victory was 0. We chose to sleep and hope the universe forgot us. Admiral Thorne looked at the projection of the swarm. He looked at the terrified Krell. He looked at his own hands. Then he did something that confused the first ones and terrified the Krell. He smiled. "Zero probability?" Thorne asked. "You calculated zero probability based on your tactics, your technology, your mindset." "We are the first ones," Ethelgard stated. "Our logic is flawless." "Your logic is binary," Thorne countered. "You see a wall, you calculate if you can break it. If you can't, you give up. Humans. We don't break walls, we climb them, we dig under them, we paint a door on them and walk through like a cartoon character if we have to." Thorne turned to Vralik. "Exarch, you asked me once how we defeated the Cinders without firing a shot. I told you we changed the environment, we changed the rules of the game." "Yes," Vralik nodded, "but this is an enemy that eats physics." "Then we feed it something indigestible," Thorne said, his eyes gleaming with the dangerous ingenuity that had allowed a soft, squishy ape to dominate a Deathworld. "The swarm seeks entropy, disorder, chaos. The Cinders was chaotic, so it tried to enter. We made it orderly, so it paused. What if we give it exactly what it wants, but on our terms?" "Explain," Ethelgard demanded. "We don't fight it," Thorne said. "We trap it, again, but this time we don't use gravity or radiation, we use information." The plan that followed was the most audacious undertaking in the history of the galaxy. It required the industrial might of the Krell, the ancient knowledge of the first ones, and the insane, lateral thinking of the humans. They built a beacon, not a beacon of light, but a beacon of data. They constructed a supercomputer the size of a solar system, using the matter of the dead planets in the Cinders. They programmed it to broadcast a signal that mimicked the ultimate entropic decay, a mathematical lure that promised the swarm the end of all things. But inside the signal was a logic bomb, a recursive loop of paradoxes, philosophical questions, and infinite decimals. It was a weaponized version of human curiosity. "We are going to bore it to death?" Lyra asked, skeptical but fascinated. "We are going to give it a puzzle it can't solve," Thorne corrected. "We are going to introduce it to the concept of why." When the swarm arrived, it was a darkness that blotted out the stars. It descended upon the Cinders, ignoring the fleets, ignoring the weapons. It went straight for the beacon. It latched onto the data stream. It began to consume. And then it stopped. The ink cloud froze. The tendrils of void that were reaching for the Krell homeworld halted. "Status!" Vralik roared from the bridge of the new flagship, a hybrid human-Krell dreadnought named the Resilience. "The swarm is processing," the ops officer reported. "CPU usage in the swarm network has hit 100%. It's caught in the loop. It's trying to calculate the final digit of pi while simultaneously debating the meaning of existence and trying to resolve the grandfather paradox." "It is stuck," Ethelgard observed, their voice filled with awe. "You trapped a cosmic horror in a conversation." "Humans can talk anything to death," Thorne muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Even a god of death." The swarm remained frozen, a dark monument to the power of abstract thought. It was not destroyed, but it was neutralized, its vast intellect consumed by the infinite complexity of the trap. In the years that followed, the alliance grew. The Krell, once the fearmongers of the sector, became the guardians of the beacon, the wardens of the frozen god. The first ones, humbled by the younger races, became advisors, teachers. And the humans, they kept moving, they kept exploring, they kept finding broken thin. GS and fixing them. On the balcony of the high spire, Vralik and Solara watched the construction of a new shipyard. It was beautiful, Krell obsidian mixed with human steel. "You know," Vralik said, his voice soft, "I still fear you." "Good," Solara laughed. "A little fear keeps you sharp, but why?" "Because," Vralik gestured to the frozen swarm in the distance, "you looked at the end of the world and you made it do homework. That is a power more terrifying than any laser." Solara looked up at the stars, the endless, dangerous, beautiful stars. "We're just gardeners, Vralik. Sometimes you pull weeds, sometimes you plant flowers, and sometimes you just have to convince the pests that the neighbor's yard is more interesting." "Or," Vralik added, a human-style smile cracking his face, "you invite the pests to dinner and teach them manners." "Exactly," Solara said, "exactly." And in the silence of the garden that was once a grave, the two old warriors watched the galaxy spin, safe, for now, in the hands of the species that refused to fight, because winning was simply a matter of changing the definition of the victory. The trap was closed. The game was won, and not a single shot had been fired. The universe, they realized, was not a dark forest to be feared. It was a puzzle to be solved, and humanity had brought the answer key.